This recording is going to cover the right and left common carotid arteries and the external carotid artery and its venous return. Now that we've finished circulation to the upper extremities, let's go upward to the head, neck, face, etc. And to do this, we're going to use the common carotid arteries. The right and left common carotid arteries extend upward towards the head, neck, face, etc. And when they reach the superior border of the thyroid cartilage, what we call our Adam's apple, they bifurcate into the right and left external carotid arteries and the right and left internal carotid arteries. The external and internal carotid arteries are considered to be the terminal branches of the common carotid artery. Note that we drop the word common after the bifurcation. So let's compare the right and left common carotid arteries. We'll take the right common carotid artery first. Right common carotid artery begins at the level of the right sternoclavicular articulation and terminates at the superior border of the thyroid cartilage. It branches from the innominate or brachiocephalic artery. It will bifurcate into the right external carotid artery and the right internal carotid artery. The left common carotid artery begins at the level of the second costal cartilage and terminates at the superior border of the thyroid cartilage. It's the second branch of the aortic arch. It will bifurcate into the left external carotid artery and the left internal carotid artery. Note that these arteries have different origins, but they have the same termination. The right and left external carotid arteries. The right and left external carotid arteries supply the superficial aspects of the head, the neck, the face, the skull, etc. on their respective sides. These arteries will begin at the superior border of the thyroid cartilage. It has 8 branches, so we're going to go through the branches and the areas that each branch supplies. The superior thyroid artery supplies the superior aspect of the thyroid gland. The lingual artery supplies the tongue. The facial artery supplies the skin of the face. Occipital artery supplies the posterior aspect of the scalp. The ascending pharyngeal artery supplies the posterior aspect of the throat or pharynx. Superficial temporal artery will supply the temporal part of the scalp. The posterior auricular artery will supply the external part of the ear or pinna, and the maxillary artery will supply the deeper structures of the face and the teeth. Well, how are you going to remember all of these branches? By this simple saying that I have an X, the X stands for external carotid, and his name is Sam F. Slop. Each letter of Sam F. Slop will correspond to an artery off the external carotid artery. S, superior thyroid artery. A, ascending pharyngeal artery. M, maxillary artery. F, the facial artery. S, superficial temporal artery. L, lingual artery. O, occipital artery. And P, the posterior auricular. So let us take the arterial flow to the superficial aspects of the head, neck, and face on the right side. And then we'll do its venous return. Blood leaves the left ventricle of the heart, goes into the ascending aorta. It will then flow into the aortic arch to the innominate artery. In the innominate artery, the blood will flow into the right common carotid artery. Right common carotid artery goes to the superior border of the thyroid cartilage and becomes the external carotid artery as it branches. The superior thyroid artery supplies the superior part of the thyroid gland. Lingual artery supplies the tongue. Facial artery supplies the skin of the face. Occipital artery supplies the posterior aspect of the scalp. Ascending pharyngeal supplies the back of the pharynx or throat. The superficial temporal supplies the temporal part of the scalp. Posterior auricular supplies the external part of the ear. And the maxillary supplies the deeper structures of the teeth, as well as the jaws. So after it supplies all of these structures, remember again, blood will flow into the arterioles and into the capillaries where the exchange for oxygenated blood for deoxygenated takes place. They will go into the small veins known as venules, and they will eventually come back towards the right atria by 2 large veins. One vein is known as the posterior auricular vein, and the other large vein is known as the posterior facial vein. These 2 veins come together and will form the external jugular vein. The external jugular vein is a tributary to the subclavian vein. The blood from the subclavian vein will flow into the innominate vein, which will then flow into the superior vena cava and go into the right atria. The posterior auricular vein and the posterior facial vein forms the external jugular vein. Now, in order to do the left side of the head, the neck, the face on the superficial aspects. Remember that you must drop the innominate artery since there is no innominate artery on the left side.